So the first topic of discussion for today is how has corporate culture, and I mean this like constant shifting of jobs. Obviously, a lot of our audience has already shown that their parents have moved around. And even as an army brat, I know it's very common for y'all to move around locations especially, which is one of the reasons why Kendra Vidyalaya was set up back in the day, if you remember. So why do you think these how do you think these shifts constantly help cultural assimilation in India?
Well, okay, first of all, see, there are 80,000 officers right now. I'm the son of an officer, so I'll only be keeping that in regard, all right? 80,000 officers. Assuming they have, two children each, say 80,000 to two, that's 160,000, right? 160,000 children moving around every 2 to 3 years. Sure, of course, it's basically like migration. Like, I don't want to brag, but it's basically like when Moses split the Nile or whatever, and then he led the entirety of Egypt into modern day Israel and all, right? It's basically like that. When 160,000 children shift every 2 years, they bring their cultures into cities, they bring their traditions into cities, they bring their ways of life into cities. For example, me, I came here 3 years ago, yeah? 3 years ago, I came here, didn't know anything about Pune or Maharashtra as a whole. I hail from the northeast, Manipur, right? I brought my food here, I brought my culture here, brought my, traditional wear here. I join a school, I expose them to, traditions, so like that. And similarly, you could give a similar regard to corporate families as well. I hope that answers you, yeah.
So wait, even you moved from Gurgaon, if I remember correctly. So how do you think those experiences shifting into Pune for the first time, a new city completely to you, really changed and shaped the way you live your life?
Yeah, so, but then again, it's corporate culture. The reason I shifted here in the first place from Gurgaon was because my father was offered a better job here, so we had a job transfer, right? And that is the very essence of corporate culture. Corporate culture chases the cyber hubs. Okay, do any of you, can we interact with the
Yeah,
audience
please.
here? Do any of you all know what the cyber hub is known as in India as of now? What is the cyber of India? Go ahead, yeah. Close, people think it's Bangalore, but what? No, think. Gurgaon, who said Gurgaon? There we go, it's Gurgaon. Gurgaon is currently known as India's cyber hub, right? So most of the technological companies, the software companies who are new to India, they chose Gurgaon for a lot of reasons, right? Most of them being that all of the software engineering resources you'll find in India, the prime spot of that is Gurgaon. And that is basically proof that corporate culture chases cyber hubs. Right. So as of now, Mumbai, the area near Mumbai, Pune, that's also becoming a new cyber of India. Right. So corporate culture is influenced. And I think this relates to the second subtopic as well. Can you just say the second subtopic once?
Before we do, I think this becomes into a bit of a more general discussion as well of how our cities have become such crockpots of modern culture. Many people refer to Mumbai as the crockpot of India. Have you heard Mumbai be called the crockpot of India? And I think because in this one city, we have so many bubbles of separate cultures and communities. You can also see the linguistic changes that occur due to that. In Bombay, the Bombay terminology and slang has become of its own. How many Mumbaikars do we have in the audience today? So I'm sure that Amshi Mumbai pride still exists with all of you somewhere or somehow, even though you're living here in Pune. So I think that comes to that even when we are moving cities, especially from villages. My family comes from Allahabad. We are still very proud of our city, even though I have lived here for 11 years, never lived in Allahabad. I am sure you are also very proud of your states, your cities, and your country, and in a lot of cases, countries where you originate from, no matter where you find yourself calling home. Coming into our second discussion then is, how do we do cultural assimilation? How do we do integration without sacrificing the cultures that already exist?
Well, I think I mentioned in my speech the core difference between cultural integration and assimilation. So as of now, what India has done is they've clearly chosen integration over assimilation as their measure. But what's happening now is as development happens, industrialization happens, India is now adopting US's approach. And in fact, this was mentioned in the G20 summit we had recently. You all know about that, right? What was the slogan of the G20 summit? Do you all know? It was very popular. It's in Sanskrit, yeah. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Right. None of you all know. Wow, okay. Yeah, the world is our family, right? That is very relevant to the topic we have today. And it was mentioned in the G20 summit that now what India will do is they'll adapt to US's approach, US's model. And US's model is literally known as the melting pot of ethnicities. That is the name of the model. What USA did was when they saw that migrations were happening from areas near USA like Mexico and all that, they made sure that people can come here, they can adapt, they can live, migrations can happen, but the main culture remains the one that USA likes, right? The westernization remains intact. USA is not influenced. USA influences the ones who are migrating to it. And that is what India is taking as its approach as of now.
When we're talking on the topic of the US is very famous for its Chinatowns and its Koreatowns and all of. I'm sure. I mean, I have never personally visited, but I'm sure you have seen the movies. A lot of countries' humanitarian cultural departments also prioritize this. Certain Southeast Asian countries are in fact promoting the creation of the restaurants, culinary as a way of cultural assimilation and showcasing their cultures has become this major point. Even in the United Kingdom, we hear a lot of stories of what is called as Indian food to the United Kingdom. That food is not really Indian food. It is Indian food influenced by their taste profile, by the immigrant populations that moved there. A lot of migrants that especially moved to Canada, for example, were from Northwest India. That is what they believe is Indian food. However, I think anyone who lives here can tell you that Indian food is so diverse, it cannot be explained even in a 15-minute speech. Different regions, different areas, all have their own variety of food. And I think even there's a very famous saying, I don't know how many people know it, is that every 100 kilometers a language dialect changes. You and me both may be from the same region of a country, maybe we're both from Uttar Pradesh, for example, but I do not understand what someone from the other side of the state is saying. Which is what brings us on to our second topic, is if states are forcing the learning of their state language, how do they do it in a way which, number one, accounts for all these dialects, accounts for all of these cultural differences and significances, and also teaches the kids not just the textbook language, but the colloquial way of speaking and using that language?
So to add on to what Param has just stated, I believe that textbook language as a definition that you have stated, we need to understand that textbook language is not just textbook language, in that there are multiple factors which affect the way the book has been made, the way the curriculum we use has been created. Thereby, I also believe that the use of colloquial language is also being promoted along with that. Unless and until you understand textbook language, it will be quite difficult to understand the colloquial way of speaking. That's why, from a personal example, in our school, the Marathi teachers encourage us to speak in Marathi. The sole reason for that is so that we acclimatize to the climate, acclimatize to the situations we face on a day-to-day basis. With our own cultural identities, it's also important to underline the factor that where we live plays a huge part on how we communicate, plays a huge role in how we sustain in today's time.
I think I mentioned this in my speech. If any of you all know, just answer. How many recognized languages does India have? 22. And how many official languages does India have? Zero. Exactly, because India is a country with a lot of dialects, like Param said, right? And to this day, there are controversies on if a language should forget official, be recognized itself or not. Okay, I'll tell you a language, you tell me if it's recognized or not. Okay, recognized. So, Bengali. Recognized. Haryanvi. Recognized. Not recognized. Bihari. Not recognized. See, so Haryanvi, Bihari, these are all languages belonging to a major state in India, right? They still don't even come under recognized languages. And that is a controversy to this day. I think you all know very recently this law was passed that state languages have to be taught in schools, right? Yeah, and you all had to learn Marathi even though you didn't. Same with me, I'm from Gurgaon, I didn't know Marathi at all. And then randomly in 9th I'm learning Marathi. But this also relates to that, right? This is a part of cultural integration. A lot of people are against this because they felt, why would we learn Marathi? We shifted here, right? Why do I have to learn? In the same way, in 2018, in the parliament, this law was proposed. It didn't pass, it was proposed that if you're giving a government exam in your state, any state, may it be NDA, may it be UPSC, or for the police forces, any exam, right? You have to be proficient in the state language, right, of the state you're appearing from. Now, tell me, how many of you know Marathi? Raise of hands. So a lot of you don't know Marathi, even though we're all in Maharashtra, right? And do any of you want to do any government exams, any of them, UPSC, police services, army, anything? In the future, maybe if you feel not interested. I see. No, this is the business-oriented school. But yeah, my point is it would be very unfair to the people who have shifted here from different states to first be expected to learn Marathi, be proficient in it, and then give a government exam with that language. Right? So obviously that law was not passed and it failed with a very high majority. But my point is discussions like this still happen in India, and that's the diversity of India. Right? I think Mayan has something to add on to this.
Well, okay. I would like to put forward my view from my own personal, life. All right. Like I said, hail from Manipur. Thousands of us, come to big cities because our family shifted here because of jobs, etc., etc. I am ashamed to say this. I can't even speak Hindi properly, right? I was born in an area where the dialect taught was similar to Korean, was more similar to Korean than the Devanagari script. And then when I come to Pune, CBSE expects me to learn Marathi, right? I actually lost my mind trying to understand the Devanagari script to learn Hindi. When I was in the fifth grade, right? That's the first year that I actually had to study Devanagari and learn Hindi in not only in terms of speaking but in terms of writing, understanding, applying it in conversations, etc., right? I couldn't, and I definitely feel that thousands of, not hundreds of thousands of kids in this country, some are NRI, they have been exposed to their another country compared to India, or sometimes they're like me, coming from states really far out, outskirts of India, don't really know much about their own country, right? Don't even know much about the language that is the most that is widely spoken throughout the country, and then okay, that's level one. Level 2, like Suvir and Param also pointed out, Bengali, Haryanvi, all of the lesser recognized but still recognized languages. Like unlike them, if I ask you, if you've even heard of Meetei, that's my language, my mother tongue, Meetei. How many of you are gonna raise your hands? Okay, I'm asking you. You know Meetei? One guy, right? One. Anyone else? I'm not wearing my glasses. I'm blind right now. But anyone else? 2. Okay, 2 out of, Param, how many people do we have in the auditorium today?
I believe around 120.
120. Only 2 know that Meetei even exists, right? I feel that the policy... It's okay, moving on, guys. Anyway, see, I feel that if we're advertising and promoting languages, might as well do it for the lesser spoken ones. I'm not saying that we need to go into multiple dialects from a state, because in Bihar, right, we know Bihari exists, Bhojpuri, basically the same thing. Bhojpuri exists as well, but there are multiple languages. Stop laughing, guys. Listen, right? Meetei. If you guys cooperate, I'll cooperate with you. Okay? Now listen. If languages like Meetei, Assamese, Tripura has its own languages, Mizo, these languages are promoted, then I will personally feel that this policy, this idea in our country to promote languages is going to work. If it isn't, then I'm sorry whether the panel agrees with me or not, but I feel like this entire idea has failed, right? Thank you.
And, okay, I saw some people laughing about Bhojpuri. Okay, fair. I know. All right. But I think a lot of you know that Bhojpuri itself is a major film industry in India, right? In Bhojpuri language, there are a lot of movies made. But Bhojpuri also is not a recognized language as per the Indian Constitution, right? And for all those of you who think this is not serious and they're laughing about this, a riot almost happened actually. The Bhojpuri community in 2019, they came forward and they were protesting, right? They were saying that why is our language recognized when it's so major? And the government of India, because they're the government of India, were unwilling, right? And a riot almost happened. And if it had happened, a lot of people would have died. But at that moment, a Bhojpuri leader, I forgot the name, came forward and appeased the community, and that saved a very, very, very prominent riot which would have happened in India. So we have to keep in mind that these languages, these conflicts, they can always turn fatal or very bad for the community, because India is a very sentimental country, and we don't give sentimental value or respect to each and everyone's culture. Riots can happen, fights can happen, right? So we have to keep that in mind. Keeping that aside, guys, please try to participate. I'm happy to see all of you laughing and replying and all that, because we have tried to dumb down the topic as much as we can for ourselves. Because when we got to know the topic itself, I first called him, and for half an hour I was like, "What is this topic? Why?" And then for remaining 3 hours, I researched upon the topic. So my point is, just try to learn from this and interact with us, because that's the point of this discussion, right?
May I, Param? Yeah, so this is where a very thin line is formed between enforcement and promotion, right? All of us are familiar with those two words, so I will not go into it, right? But if you're promoting a language, right, it does not mean that you're gonna write every single one of the government documents. You're gonna make your courts 100% follow that language and that procedure that your state wants it to follow, without accepting the fact that in this country, that like the 22 major languages, forget the 2,000 languages I mentioned, including mine, right? Forget them. The 22 languages, each states, right? They recognize each other. Of course, to be a part of India, you need to recognize that they're, if you're, let's say the 22nd state, there are 21 states before you. You got to recognize that fact, right? And yes, they do recognize that fact, but they refuse to let their government change their policies and lawmakers and laws and everything that they have to, that is be given respect to the government, right? They change nothing. They change nothing to Bhojpuri, if you want to laugh at that, right? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I think governments have started using language as a tool of politics as well, where division is being created based on these languages. Have you seen an Aadhaar website? How many of you have been to the Aadhaar website? When you try to open any document, the first thing that comes is a language selector screen. The translation quality on that language selector screen differs massively. There are still parts of the government of Maharashtra websites that you cannot access without knowing Marathi. It is physically impossible. And even when the English translated versions exist, they are so poor that anyone who doesn't understand even basic Marathi, tough luck. You are being prevented access to government services.
Google Translate is the only option you have.
We are now coming to rely on technology and artificial intelligence to translate government websites. But we can't start doing that with legal documents anytime soon. So where is the line where governments still promote their language but allow for the citizens of the state, even migrate or original, to start speaking the languages they want?
Completely true. The statement that language is getting politicized and used as a tool for politics, it's so true, but it's the classic case of Indian politics. Like, what happened is, when all of the politicians very confidently passed this bill in the Lok Sabha that yes, you have to learn state language now, what they didn't think was the politicians of a particular state whose state language was not recognized. Like I said, Haryana is not recognized. So now the Haryanvi politicians, they very confidently said, yes, pass this law, teach state languages in the states. But then what they didn't realize was, what will Haryana do? Haryanvi is not a recognized language, so they can't teach Haryanvi in the schools. What will they do now? And then again, the fighting happened. In Haryana, for 3 whole months, right, the CBSE board, the ICSE board, the government itself, everyone's discussing, arguing, fighting. What do we teach for state language? We don't have a state language. Then what did they decide? They decided that their state languages for Haryana will be Hindi and Punjabi. No Haryanvi. You're not in Punjab, but you're learning Punjabi as a state language in Haryana. And that is a classic case of how politicians just forget, right? For voters, just forget what will happen to their state, to their region. And I think that's a prime example of...
This is a notion that exists, that if you do not speak my language, I have heard this. Openly, I'm telling you, I've heard someone tell me, how can he be educated? He doesn't speak English. And that man is a PhD. So this notion that foreign languages are needed to be called educated is a completely failed notion. So that is, I think, where that state language education fails and falls. And I think in a country which has very central education systems, What are the major boards in India? There's CBSE, there's ICSE, there's IGCSE, there's IB. IB and IGCSE are standardized globally. ICSE and CBSE are decided by boards sitting in Delhi in their nice glass corporate offices. Maharashtra had an international board. How many of you knew this? We had a Maharashtra International Education Board. It closed down 4 years ago.
Param, if I may, I 100% agree to that. Your last point about, culture and languages being taught, it's two separate things, right? 100% agree. Because see, you can teach people languages, but what the government and what the boards are expecting is that if they learn a language, they'll be automatically exposed to the culture, which is only true if you speak the language that you're learning, that too once a week for 1 hour for most schools. If you speak that language every single day, and you speak that language to people who actually are aware of their own cultures, right?
When someone is afraid or cautious of someone with a foreign culture, not necessarily that they recognize, that is xenophobia, right? And in India, that is very prevalent, right? Like when I shifted here, a lot of my friends told me that, Suvir, अगर तू कभी भी बड़े होके रोड पे जा रहा है, गाड़ी चला रहा है, if you're in a car, you're driving, a traffic cop catches you, right? It'll be much more probable that he lets you go if you say Dada जाओ दे आना, than if you say भैया मुझे मराठी नहीं आती, right? Because I'm gonna say भैया मुझे मराठी नहीं आती. I don't know Marathi.
Can confirm that, by the way.
All I know is Mazanav Savira hai. That's the one sentence I learned in Marathi.
Might I add, okay, we'll digress just for a second. I was in Delhi, right? I was walking by. See, I already mentioned I don't know Hindi or because Delhi is geographically closer to Punjab and Haryana. You see the influences there, so their accent. So I got stopped. I was on a cycle. I accidentally, I think, tripped over someone, right? to 2-3 meters, I cycled down, and then some guy stops me and he screams something at me. I think it's a swear. I'm like, what? What did you just say? I feel offended. And the guy just tells me that I dropped something from my pocket because I went through a bump. I went over a road bump. And I feel like he's fighting me. And so for 5 minutes, I'm not swearing, but I'm shouting at him. Like, because I thought something he said, I thought that he said something horrible, right? Like, because that's what happens when you're exposed to people like Suvir. All right, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
So my point is xenophobia. So I think the main motive the government had while releasing this law of state language was to combat xenophobia, but all they did was increase xenophobia while making kids hate them, right? So my point is Dada Saudiana is a keyword in Maharashtra, but it won't be in other states. In other states, other languages will be effective. So that is one of the really big aspects we have to combat, right? That is the whole point of cultural integration. You don't need to know the language to be comfortable in the state itself.
Or things like, who was the first Prime Minister of India? To us, that is basic general knowledge. But you ask someone who...
Pandit Jawaharlal
I wasn't
Nehru.
asking you who the first Prime Minister of India is, but I'm giving you an example. Or who was the constitutional architect? This is elementary questions for us. But you go ask someone who hasn't been in the country for 11, 12 years, who the first Prime Minister of India is, they'll give you, India has a Prime Minister?
India is a democracy?
I have heard that.
India got freedom? I didn't know that.
Legitimately, I am giving you legitimate experiences that I have had. I've asked someone who was the first Prime Minister of India, thinking that they spend their entire life in the country. And the first question I got asked was, India has a Prime Minister, yes or no?
So to add on to what all of them have said collectively, our attempt was not to tell you about those languages. Our attempt was to give you a snippet of the culture. Our attempt was to give you a display of how various countries celebrate their cultures. So I believe if we are trying to teach them the state language, we need to teach them the state's culture. Without the culture, teaching the language would be near to impossible. That's why how many of you are taking interest in Marathi as of now? The number is quite low. But now if I would tell you, go on the roads, see the pandals they put up during Ganpati, that is something which grabs attention immediately. Why? Because it's culture. Culture is always easier to understand, even though it's very complex as a whole, it is always much easier to comprehend than language. And when we learn culture is the point where we can effectively learn language, in my opinion.
How many of you celebrate Easter? Or know people who celebrate Easter?
Is that the eggs one?
Yes.
That's the
So
X
X
one.
one.
I knew that. Yeah.
Great. Now, if you go to a area which is Christian dominated, do you think these answers would change? Viman Nagar is a very big, there's a church in Viman Nagar. If I go ask in the church, how many of you celebrate Easter? You think I'd see a single hand down. The thing is that we have, as a government, as a state, need to start taking initiatives where instead of just promoting culture in our own language, we start promoting culture in a language or in other languages that everyone can understand. The airports have an initiative, Airport Authority of India, where they call artisans and craftsmen from the own region of the airport to the airport, because airports are a tool that we should use to show culture. Have you seen the mural in Terminal 1 of Pune International Airport towards near security? The government doesn't need to spend that money on the mural. It wouldn't have made a difference. Leaving it as a white wall isn't going to affect airport operations. But you know what it affects? It affects your interpretation and understanding of what Pune is.
Yeah, exactly. Because see, an airport, a station, those are the first thing you see as soon as you step into a city or a country, right? That's the first step and your first, look and feel of the vibe of the entire city, the culture. And another example I have to give is Kolkata's airport. Kolkata has two airports now, I believe. The second one, which is way more cultural, I feel, right? When you enter it, if you enter during Durga Puja, right, they change the entire airport in a week, just for a week, right? And that makes you feel really interested to learn like things about Bengal, things, not the language necessarily, but interesting things about Bengal. Be inspired by why is Ma Durga a big symbol for them, right? Why why is she? Of course, she is reputed all over India for Hindus, right? But why is she especially reputed in West Bengal? Right? That's it.
Even airports which act as gateways into the country, New Delhi, Kempegowda International Airport in Bangalore, Indira Gandhi International in Delhi, you see the cultural displays they put. They will not have displays of famous sites in India. They might, but what will they put? They will build monuments. They will build statues. They will make the airport living, breathing the culture of the country. I think IGI Terminal 3, because that's the international terminal at Delhi, is the best example of this. We saw an entire airport which looks more like a museum. Even our stations, how many of you have had the luck to pass through Jhansi as a station? It's fine if you haven't, I understand. But if you go to Jhansi station or you go to Pune station, you will see statues, you will see artwork. This is, I think, how we promote cultural diversity.